Hey everybody, welcome back to Historians of the Movies podcast. I'm your host and creator, Jason Herbert, where every single week we are talking about movies and the histories behind them. And this week we're not talking about a movie, we're talking about a series on HBO or Max. HBO. I'm not going to call it Max. I'm calling it HBO till I die. We're talking about The Penguin today. I brought on for you guys my great friend Blake Scott Ball. He is an associate professor at the University of North Alabama and the author of the forthcoming Batman, The Making of an American Myth, which is going to be coming out. Blake, when is that coming out? Or is that one done yet? Or are we still in research on this?
It is. I'm writing the manuscript, finishing the manuscript, turning that in the end of this year, and the book is set to come out with the next Batman movie, which is going to be fall 26.
We're going to have you on before then, too. So if you're listening in, if you're a regular listener, you'll know that this is an emergency podcast. We don't have any music. There's no editing. We're just hitting record, and we're ripping with this today because I wanted to respond to this. I've got gung-ho about doing this episode. And the closer we got to The Penguin coming out, the more excited I got. Like, I don't know about you, man, because I kind of feel like maybe he was the best part of the Batman film from 2022 itself. I mean, I really loved it. I feel like we're in the middle of maybe a Colin Farrell renaissance or something like that. I don't know. We've now seen the first episode. The second episode is due to come out in a few hours, I think tonight, actually. So what did you think about the first one? This is going to be a spoiler-filled thing. So by all means, go ahead and talk at large about this episode. How'd you feel about this? Like,
well, I think you make a really good point about him being the Penguin was certainly the most humorous element of this new Batman movie, which was tone wise was it wasn't without humor, but it was definitely the darkest of the Batman movies, and I think that they have something really special here with the Penguin. Colin Farrell in particular, people have talked about this since the Batman movie came out a couple of years ago. But when you watch him for an hour worth of television in all the prosthetics and makeup and everything, he just disappears. I've never seen an actor just so disappear into another person. It's really incredible what they've done with all of that.
Yeah, I think obviously the comparison here to the Penguin with this Matt Reeves Batman universe, and of course this is weird because we've got a whole other Batman that we're going to see here in a couple of years as well under DC. But I guess maybe the immediate comparison is going to be some of the Marvel shows that we saw. But I have to tell you, I like this so much better in one episode.
Yeah.
And I was tweeting the other night, I was like, I'm 17 minutes in and I'm sold on this series, right? It's gritty, it's grimy. Like, we never hear the name Batman.
Yeah.
In this entire episode. And I love that.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, yeah, you're exactly right. And apparently, from the interviews I've seen, there is no Batman appearance in the course of this series. They really wanted to let this character have some room to stand and breathe on his own. And it's really gotten me to thinking about how there's been conversation for years about just how good Batman's rogue gallery is. But now we have a second iteration. We've got Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. We've now got Colin Farrell's Penguin, completely standalone in their own world. I mean, in Batman's world, but they don't need Batman as a. They're not a. They're not just there as a counterpoint to Batman, and you could argue that Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn
Oh yeah.
with her film after Suicide Squad was has done the same thing. So the DC really has something unique here in that they've got some really strong villain characters that people will show up to watch, um, uh, whether the hero's there or not.
Is there a danger, do you think, Blake, in these? Because now we see this with Venom, like in
Mm,
making these
hmm
villains likable and making them like, oh, and you know, the Joker film with Joaquin Phoenix
hmm
did this. I couldn't stand that film. I found it to be utterly unwatchable. It was just over the top. I couldn't stand it. But I'm wondering, and what a problem to us, and I was talking about this with my great friend Thomas Lecoq, who of course has been on the pod a bunch of times. The great thing with Joker is like he's a psychopath. I don't need to know his backstory. In fact, I think the less I know about him, the more I enjoy the character. So is there a
hmm
danger, do you think, in going back and telling, say, the origin story of Oz Cobb or these other people and us make, because ultimately I find myself rooting for this character. And I'm
Sure,
like, this guy's an arch fiend, right?
sure,
Is there a danger here?
sure. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's and it doesn't just have to be these comic book figures. Look at what Breaking Bad did with Walter White.
Mm-hmm.
That you're still torn by the end of that show, about whether or not you want him to win, and or Tony Soprano. The
Mm-hmm.
debate all these years later about what happens after that final shot, that final scene. I think some of that resonates from that kind of at least empathy that you feel with that character, um, and it's a necessary. I think it's a necessary part of storytelling, um, but it is challenging. It is challenging because morally we look at these characters and go, okay, clearly these are bad people, and not anything that we want to model here, uh, but still, we find ourselves rooting, and I think that's some of the appeal of experiencing this, almost like a horror film. Some of the appeal of this, I think, is that conflicted feeling that we have, that I'm this is challenging what I consider enjoyment, and maybe it's saying something about us as the viewer.
I don't
um
know. Yeah, maybe there's a projection thing, Blake, where it's like,
mm.
if I could, would I? And the immediate thing I'm thinking about right now as you bring this up is John Gotti. The Teflon Don
Yeah,
of
yeah,
80s, I guess early 90s and things like that, for those of us who were familiar with it. Like,
yeah.
no doubt this guy was a murderer. He was a violent thug. I'm hoping that there's no Sicilians in Colorado right now, but people were kind of rooting for this guy, the Teflon
Yeah,
Don and things like that.
yeah,
And I feel like
yeah.
this is yet another thing. But I want to ask you, before we get too deep into the episode and like our
hmm
thoughts on Farrell, who is just magnificent, spoiler
yeah.
alert, can we talk a little bit about maybe the history of the Penguin? Like, we think about the great Batman villains, and we'll talk about the Pantheon
hmm
here in a minute, but like,
hmm
who is the Penguin traditionally in Batman lore?
Yeah, well, the Penguin first appears. He's part of that initial inventive explosion of Bob Kane and Bill Finger. This is 1941, so we're right in the midst of World War II era, and the Penguin. The origin story here is a few different versions. One of the versions that Bob Kane who is a very slippery uh, um, uh, narrator of the truth. But the version that Bob Kane says is that he saw a gentleman, an English style looking gentleman, walking down the sidewalk in Manhattan with an umbrella on a sunny day, and it gets him thinking about the weirdness of this person and imagining characters. Um, Bill Finger suggested that it came more so, and maybe it's a blend of these two, but it came more so from the Penguin cartoon character who was used for cool cigarette advertisements, KOOL,
Mhm.
at the time, and in the first iterations of this character, this is a very cartoony design character, uh, almost to the point to where he stretches fitting with the design of Batman at the time, um, who was still he had become a little lighter with the introduction of Robin, but he's still dark detective kind of figure, and then you have this much more cartoony, exaggerated British uh, aristocrat of the Penguin. Um, Now, of course, the Penguin also became a figure in the 1966 Adam West television show, played by Burgess Meredith. An incredible portrayal. I mean, really it defined that character for a lot
Mhm.
of people. The voice and the the
Mhm.
kind of penguin stuff.
Did
And
he
then
not
you
have the
get,
cigarette holder and all that too?
yes,
I
he
seem to
did.
remember,
Yes, he
right?
did.
Right.
So, almost some of that Rooseveltian element to it. And the key to this character, one of the keys of this is uh, he wears his social status forward, right? He is uh, at least imagines himself from this elite social class. He's above all of these things, but at the same time, he's down in the daily grime and grit of crime in Gotham City. Uh,
I'm imagining someone else who we've seen on the news, but go on. So
right.
he even looks the
Um,
part, does he not? Go on.
hey, yeah, yeah.
Right.
1992, uh, Tim Burton very famously reimagines this character, played by Danny DeVito. Does an incredible job. Now, one of the directions they went with their Penguin in the Batman Returns film is that he actually has, the likeness of uh, Oswald Cobblepot had to the Penguin had always been sort of this really sort of a caricature of this guy. He kind of moves like a penguin.
Mm.
Burton took it a little more literally, and made it, almost some like uh, body horror elements, that this guy has deformities. He has a flipper instead of a hand. They revamped a storyline actually from the 1960s television show by having the Penguin run for governor of Gotham City. I mean, mayor of Gotham City.
Mhm.
And there again, he's not hiding his rough edges. He's not hiding his background, but there's this appeal to having this tough, dark figure, as a political figure. Once again, the parallels here to
Mhm.
our own politics are a bit uncanny. Um, but that is. A key turn in the history of this character. It's also the one Warner Brothers had signed in advance of that second film, because the box office on the original 1989 Batman had been so huge. Warner Brothers had signed an advance deal with McDonald's to do Happy Meals off of the this Batman Returns film, and um, the Penguin is grotesque. At one point, in the scene where he's dying, he's got like
Oh
this
yeah, the
this
stuff,
like
right? Yeah,
black bile coming out of his mouth, and very
he's a
famously,
sexual maniac, kind of going after
yeah, yes,
Catwoman, right?
yes, that's right, that's right.
Just what we want to
It,
market to kids.
exactly, exactly. And the folks at McDonald's were furious. Warner Brothers was pretty furious. So much
You
so that
hired
even
Tim Burton.
yeah, that's right. Even though Batman Returns, you would think for all of the criticism and concern that it sparked at the time, you would think that Batman Returns did terribly at the box office. It didn't. It did really well, but they're so concerned about Tim Burton's direction that they push him out. They push him
Yeah,
out from the third one, and Keaton leaves with him. And then we start into the Schumacher
Schumacher.
universe. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. Go ahead. We so is this the third time? Of course, I'm assuming that we've seen him in like some of the cartoons and stuff like that. Every
mm-hmm,
time someone
mm-hmm,
brings up, best Batman, best Joker, something like that,
mm-hmm,
somebody's always like,
mm-hmm.
oh, stop. All right, live action, right? So this is
Yeah,
this is a
yeah,
different Penguin. We didn't see him
yeah.
in the Christopher Nolan films.
Right.
As far as first time to visit him, and again, like you were saying earlier, he much needed somehow stretch of levity in the Batman film,
Mm.
which somehow was darker than the Nolan film, somehow darker. It feels like in times, emo Batman. I mixed feelings on that particular film, but I was blown away by Colin Farrell. So can we talk a little
Yeah.
bit about what is making Farrell different than the other iterations we've seen?
Well, in some regard, I think it does have to do with the caliber of actor. Colin Farrell has been in a whole range of different roles over a long career. Um, but he really um, he really brings some humanity to this role. This character um, has always been this sort of an exaggerated, cartoonish sort of character, and um, Farrell is behind all of this makeup and covering, is bringing humanity to this figure. Uh, Part of it, you and I were discussing earlier this week some interview clips
Mm.
where Farrell, who is Irish, had worked with his voice coach and actually done research to isolate
Gefilte
a very
fish.
but yeah,
Right.
gefilte fish. Yeah, a very particular accent. He said this accent comes from um, this New York property manager from the 1980s, and this recording of this very particular accent. And when you hear it, I think part of what makes this character feel alive is that they have really tried to, despite the look, they have tried to ground him as a historical person in an actual place. And uh, the the Nolan movies, for example, the Nolan movies sort of represent Gotham in a lot of different places. There's a lot of Chicago in their Gotham,
Mm.
but in that the Dark Knight Rises, the third film, they're at the Gotham Knights game, but it's very clearly the Pittsburgh Steelers
Yeah.
stadium, and so there's some New York in there. Matt
Gotham is
Reeves
New York,
Batman.
though, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It is New York. In fact, in the first 2 years before they really kind of settle into the lore of things, it's not called Gotham. It's called New York City. Batman is fighting crime in New York City, and that's always the undertone of this. This show was shot completely in New York City, and it you feel it. You
Yeah.
feel it in what they're portraying here, and not just in the setting, but in the people. You get the sense um, you know of people living in a space and time, not cartoon characters. And again, Farrell is just doing uh, such a profound job with it. But he's surrounded by in just this first episode, he's surrounded by some great actors who are filling out the rest of this world.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a second because I feel like with Farrell has at times suffered from the same thing that I think maybe sometimes hurts Brad Pitt, which is that he is a character actor in a leading man's body, you know. And I think Farrell came out. I remember when he came out, like Minority Report and things like that. We're like, and we were kind of pushed. We were kind of sold that
Uh-huh.
Farrell was the next big thing, and he
Uh-huh.
wasn't that guy. If you saw his early work, let's say like in Tigerland or things like that, you really saw him as like this guy who really excels in smaller films,
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
intimate, if you will, and things like
Yeah.
that. And I think that, and then the tabloids kind of got a hold of it. And I think there was maybe some pushback to the idea of Colin Farrell, and it seems like, recently, he's this very real friendship with Brendan Gleeson that I think people have like really taken him back in. And he's on these really great bits, these small parts, like we saw The Gentleman, where he's playing. It's like
Mhm. Mhm.
I think that there's this spot where we want to embrace Colin Farrell again for all of his work, and he's so magnificent in this role.
Yeah.
I do want to speak to your idea that you feel like everybody is in New York. For me, it felt like I knew we were in New York because everyone was planning on moving to Florida. I just that was I could just feel it. Everyone's moving down to Boca in like 6 more months. They're like, we're gonna get down there. We're gonna tell everybody how good the pizza is. It's like, stop it already. Um, you know,
well,
you're talking.
well,
Go ahead.
and that there is a real part of this show that I think in part part of this feeling is that it is set within um, a certainly in tone at least of a the Italian American community.
Mm-hmm.
um, and whether and this has a long history in the gangster TV show genre. And this is, of course has complications because of you know the challenges of portraying a certain group of people as um, all in some way or another connected to crime organizations and things like this. But there is this very um, Italian American kind of undertone of all of this. It's family, it's community. These neighborhoods are not just people who happen to live next to each other. These are communities with roots and history and connection, for better and worse.
Yeah, but Blake, are you bringing history into the Historians of the Movies podcast? Right, right, right. I mean,
Uh,
it's
I
you
mean,
know, it's absolutely great, and I feel like you're watching this great crime drama unfold. And of course, the readings I read this last week, there were obviously lots of comparisons to Sopranos, but of course, and we'll get into the thing with the mother here in a bit. But Penguin outdates the Sopranos by decades. Was the thing I kept
mhm,
thinking about. So this is,
mhm,
and of course, you're gonna. The great thing here is we're seeing the rise of this man who really, when we're introduced to him as Burgess Meredith, or we see in the comic books, he's often already at the top. He's already a
yeah,
formidable presence. And the
yeah,
thing that the Batman does so well in 2022 is like he's kind of a laughing stock
yeah,
to the criminal masterminds. And even
yeah,
in this role, we don't see him as the super brain villain. Like, no, he's obviously putting pieces in place by the end of it. You're like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
Okay, he's got
Yeah.
going on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to talk about these other rogues here because
Yeah.
our nemesis is not Batman in this show. It's Kristen Milioti, who I wrote.
Yeah.
Wow, Sophia Falcone. Holy cow! I didn't know to expect this out of her. And of course,
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on this rogues gallery of the Penguin, if you will? Because we could talk about
Yeah.
this about her portrayal. She's obviously going to be the big bad for our bad
Mm-hmm.
guy,
Mm-hmm.
but also we've got Salvatore Clancy Brown walks on set, and I'm just like, let's go. It's a Highlander guy who died in the blood. Pour Clancy Brown into my soul, like that voice and everything. He's so great. What are your thoughts on what we saw out of, say, Sophia Falcone and maybe Salvatore Moroni?
Yeah. I think it's so great to have Batman grounded in this world of facing kind of very realistic sort of mob crime. Like the early character, there have been so many cartoony versions of this character. But I think for folks of my generation, certainly our generation, the Tim Burton movies were huge, but as far as like really introducing us to the whole world and cast of Batman, it's Batman the animated series there in the early and mid '90s. And one of the things that they did, you had all the colorful, bigger than life kind of arch villains, but you also had the Falcones, and you had the Maronis, and you had the the sort of politics and interplay of machine politics and organized crime and those elements going on that felt very, once again, sort of grounded in a place and time. In many ways, when this was written into those early stories of Batman, it's being pulled from headlines in the local New York papers, and being brought into the world of this character. I thought particularly this Sophia Falcone character is incredible, and this is in some ways a different physical portrayal of that character. So
Thank
this
you.
character. Yeah, this character comes up in the comics, particularly a great miniseries done by Jeff Loeb and the fairly recently deceased Tim Sale was the artist. Some really incredible work. A piece called "The Long Halloween." And in the Long Halloween, Sophia Falcone is a prominent character. She is a very large woman in stature, tall, broad set, very physically powerful. With the TV show, while you can see that they get some of the character inspirations from the Long Halloween, including her nickname. At one point, she brings up, when they're having their dinner together, her and the Penguin, she brings up this nickname, the Hangman, that she's gotten in her time at Arkham. But physically, this portrayal of Sophia Falcone is very small, very petite, a small stature woman, but the um, there is a ferociousness underneath in this portrayal that is chilling. There's a moment when they go to hug. You remember this at the end of their dinner. They exchange a little hug. It's great to see you, and she whispers into his ear, "I always knew you were capable of more." and she smiles at him for a second, and then it just vanishes into this piercing death stare.
It's something like Russell Crowe's A Beautiful Mind, where like it's Crowe got so much work, famous for obviously like Confidential and Gladiator, but A Beautiful Mind really became actually that more physical role where he was actually having to really be this real subtle, and she's doing the same stuff. And I felt like casting her character, envisioning her character as this, like you said, this petite woman opposite this very kind of large man in the Penguin works really well. And there's obviously, our protagonist, Oz is looking at like he's scared shitless of this woman. She is a force for the rest of the series. I can't wait to see what they're going to do with her.
Yes.
I'm a little terrified. And I love the fact that they made this, that it's working. And I think it speaks a lot to her abilities as well. Farrell's going to get all the love on this series, and rightfully so. But oh my gosh, there's a lot of people doing some lifting here. I want to ask you also about a character I'd never seen before, and maybe you're familiar with him, Victor Aguilar. He's Renzi Felice is playing this I guess initially unwilling accomplice, the protege, his sidekick. What are we thinking here? Because it's obvious the stutter is doing a lot of work early on. We think it's drawing him in.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on this initial relationship, and where do you see this going?
Well, a lot of the chatter online this week was, wait, now the Penguin gets a Robin too?
Right. Wait, people on chat forums are not happy with their fan base. Please.
No. I think it's all in kind of good humor. I think a lot of people online were really enjoying this character. It is this figure. You can. It's incredible, and again, it goes to the level of acting and directing in this series. Which, just to call back to the very beginning here, is branded HBO. It's on Max, but they are, I think, Warner Brothers is wisely sort of reclaiming. Yeah. HBO means something, right? It means prestige, TV, and you can see that in the show. And so there's a lot in this show that is not spoken, but it is so clearly communicated in the physical, emotional relationship between these characters. And you can see the first moment that the nervous stutter comes out in Victor, this character, that it hits a chord with Oz, the Penguin. And he recognizes, I think, something of himself and his own struggles with physical disability, that he wears a leg brace. And at one point we see him
so good.
We see him. He has one of his feet has a deformity, and that is obviously very painful for him, physically painful, and he lives every day of his life with that. And so, seeing the struggle in this other character, he and they play it in such a great way, because he doesn't let on that that he is that he has sympathy or empathy with this young guy. He sort of says, "I'll let you hang around for a minute, and you could be useful for a minute." And there is a mentor-mentee relationship that's developing here. Again, it's a bit unsettling because it's in the context of crime, but there is this, and you can see Victor growing in his sense of self-confidence in a way that that you don't get that he had before this interaction with with Oz. That the two are sort of um, uh, fulfilling one another in a way.
I'm interested to see what happens with this series, because I think in my mind the predictable thing is for us to root for Victor to find himself and find a way out, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think what I want to see from this, I want him to dive in full on. I want this to be the tragedy of corruption. I want to see a broken young man. Like I think that one of the like we were talking earlier is that one of the weaknesses of doing these anti-hero films is that we start to try to find ways to like them, and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are villains. These are full on, and I want to embrace the fact that they're doing bad things, and the things that they do hurt people, and that's ultimately got to be the lesson, which is that this is a good kid who ultimately gets destroyed by the system or something like that. I'm interested to see where they go with this, because I feel like one narrative choice is a far more brave thing and less likely to see than the other.
Yeah.
But I really I want to see what happens here. What's the alternate Robin doing?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and how would, another really piercing element of this portrayal in the Penguin, that you get in the very opening minutes of this first
Oh,
episode.
I did not see it coming.
No.
Go ahead.
He basically he decides with Carmine Falcone dead
Mm-hmm.
in the
Yep.
Batman film. He decides, now's my opportunity to get whatever I can get and get out of here and figure out, just go rob Falcone and figure out what my next step is. And while he's there, he's caught by Falcone's son, who is this, who in his own right, in just a few minutes, is a very interesting character himself, because you get the sense that he is equally unhinged, can be an extremely violent character and cruel character, but at the same time is deeply insecure about whether or not he can live up to this organization and the power that his father had exerted on Gotham City. And there's a moment in this exchange where Oz gets very honest and talks about this local political boss in the neighborhood who he looked up to and was revered by the neighborhood and the people, and they had a parade and they cheered for him. And Oz is sort of imagining himself, like, maybe I could be that guy.
Maybe I could be the hero. The
Yeah,
local
maybe
hero,
I could
right?
be the hero. And the younger Falcone laughs in his face, just how pitiful. And in a split second, Oz pulls his pistol and just puts
I
3 or 4
watching.
bullets
I was
in
like,
this
did
guy's
that just
chest.
happen?
Yeah, and then he laughs. He laughs this freeing laugh, right? Like you're seeing for a split second the real Oz come out.
Mm.
And then he comes back to his senses and realizes what
Oh
he's
shit!
done again.
Oh shit! He's like, oh, and the rest of this,
Yeah.
and then masterfully is able to kind of spin this into the Maronis had him murdered. He's got giving the ring back to Salvatore Maroni clearly endears him, but he's like, okay, because Maroni doesn't trust him either, kind of laughs him off too.
Yep.
And it feels like I was like, no, I've been reborn through this whole thing, and I am the mastermind who is going to take over. And I kept finding myself like, I'm like, okay, I want this evil guy to succeed. I got to ask you.
Yeah.
The only other negative we saw people chatting was the direct comparisons again to Sopranos with the relationship with the mother. Tony Soprano had what his mom was, Olivia, I think it was, and now we've got his mom clearly dealing with some dementia.
Yeah.
Looks like there were some siblings who never made it out of a bathtub. This
Mhm.
is going to go some dark places as well. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
this? As far as like, is this too close to the bone when it comes to like comparing this to The Sopranos? Or wait, do we find out that most people still have parent issues even as they age? Like, what's going on here? I mean, is this a wise move?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things I've found is I've been researching Batman and the early origins of comic books. Um, is that the comic book medium throughout its history has always been about remixing, repackaging, reblending elements from elsewhere in popular culture, in popular literature, all of these sort of things, and presenting them for the time. The success of the comic book medium has been, and comic strips are the same way, has been their ability to respond in almost real time to what's going on in the world, right? And staying immediately relevant. But in staying immediately relevant, you also instantly date yourself. Right. One of the I wrote my first book on Charlie Brown and Charles Schultz Peanuts, and those characters who were so relevant to the time in which the 60s and 70s when they were so big, have now in some ways culturally become inseparable from the aesthetics and
Yeah.
the memory of that time. And Batman is a character who in some ways feels timeless, because he is connected to that 1940s gangster, that version of New York City sort of thing. But he's also a character who is continually readapting to our time, the humor of the 60s, that kind of sarcastic, satirical
Mhm.
humor of the 60s with Adam West, or the grunge kind of era, the dark kind of neo-gothicism of the late 80s and early 90s that Burton was playing on, and now this sort of you can't watch Matt Reeves the Batman and Robert Pattinson and not. I mean, it's just you walk away going, "Wait a second, was Kurt Cobain Bruce Wayne? What's going on here?"
Oh, well, they played Nirvana
Well,
pretty heavily into it, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. Um, but uh, but I think so I think it is understandable that once again we see this this show is influenced by the legacy of the Sopranos, and I
mhm.
think it's not hiding that, but also it's not it, it is homage, but also taking that and let's develop our own story here. And I think to take on the issue of dementia is I think it really is a relevant story angle for what a lot of uh, uh, Gen X Americans are experiencing with watching their parents. One of the largest generations in American history, entering old age and facing, living longer than Americans ever have, and facing the challenges of aging and decline.
Well, there's so much of that, right, Blake? Which is, and I've had
Yeah.
friends of mine who have who have and are dealing with family members with dementia, Alzheimer's, and things like that, cancer, so forth, right?
Mhm.
And it goes
Yeah.
on two different things. There's the aspect of having to watch someone you love suffer and understanding that their lives are in decline,
Yeah.
and of course to be oftentimes saddled with the responsibility of ensuring that this person who you love is cared for. And then
Yeah.
I think also, and I think every generation experiences this, is there's the shocking reality that we're next in line, right? And it comes as like, as you start to see, now it's no longer your grandparents who are in decline. Now it's your parents, right?
Yeah.
And that means you're next. And the shocking level of mortality. We always talk about like midlife crises when it hits in the 40s and things like that. But that often means that our parents are in their 60s or 70s or maybe 80s or things like that.
Right.
And we're having to realize that like my morality is a real thing. Mortality is a real thing now. And on top of everything else, and you have to maybe sometimes compartmentalize that and things like that. And he's having to like, on top of trying to build this criminal empire. He's got to take care of mom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You better be polite. When he tells the victim, it's like, watch your manners.
Yeah.
Apologize to those of you in New York who haven't to listen to my version of an accent. But yeah. All right. I want to ask you, Blake, couple closing thoughts here.
Okay.
I asked you early on what you thought of the series. Do you see any comparisons to anything else out there? Have you ever seen anything like this thus far? Because I think we're both fans.
Well, I think, like I said, I do see strong elements of The Sopranos. I see elements in the Falcone family of The Godfather. That there's some elements of that. I think one of the unique story angles here is that with this version of the Penguin is that he has this deep ambition and this drive from his mother. I think his mother saying it's got to be you. You've got to lean in and take this. But at the same time, everyone outside of Sophia Falcone does not in any way see him as the heir. They don't expect him to be the one to take this. And I think this character is beginning to realize that could be his strength. If he can outlive Sophia, his strength could be that they don't suspect him. And that he could be bigger than this cartoonish sort of figure that they've all assumed him to be. I love that story angle, and I think it's got a lot of great potential. I also think it's really interesting that this feels just like the character that we saw in the Batman movie.
They really carried it through.
Yeah. But the tone of this show already feels a little different from, because so much of the tone of the movie was dominated by where the headspace that Bruce Wayne was in, right? And the demon he's struggling with. This one already feels connected, but feels like it's its own thing. We're going to delve into a different neighborhood in Gotham than we've been before. We've always been at Wayne Manor, right, with Bruce Wayne. Now we're heading into what's it like to live in this world, in this corrupt city, and live in the slums rather than living in the mansion.
Right. Well, I think there's a few different things. One is like getting back to your idea as far as his way forward, right? If you've read Sun Tzu, you'll know that the famous line is all warfare is deception, right? So it's not about them seeing you coming. And then there's this idea that everyone is the star of their own show. I mean, what if we were watching Batman through someone else's eyes? And that's clearly what's happening here. And for me, Blake, the thing I kept coming through was like, this is Andor. This is Andor.
Yeah.
Right? And the brilliance of Andor, what we've been asking for years, was just to see something. I'd see a rom-com, whatever, in the Star Wars universe with no lightsabers, no, like, people just having to live their lives, right?
Yeah.
And what we have here, if we've got a series inside the Batman universe with no Batman, there's no Justice League here. The Green Lantern Corps isn't showing up. These are a bunch of people. Maybe Batman's out there. Maybe we'll hear about him at some point. I kind of hope that we never do. But I want to know these guys are like, they have got other problems going on than what that psychopath Bruce Wayne's trying to deal with down the road. You know,
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
I love the grittiness
Well,
of it.
yeah. Well, and I think just one last element
Please,
to expand out into sort of the history of the medium. I think in some ways what we're seeing, the real struggle of the last, especially since COVID, the struggle has been in Hollywood, in the entertainment industry, has been the the potential of streaming, right? The potential to unleash us from the hold of studios and of networks and of censors and all these kind of things, to sort of democratize in a way, break open the types of stories that can be told and all these sorts of things. But also the challenge, as we saw in this last writer's strike, of what does all this mean for the working people who are uh, trying to make a living in this creative space, for writers and for set crew and all these things, as the whole business model of the visual entertainment industry has been flipped on its head. How do we navigate all of this, and is it economically viable, and all of these sorts of things? my I the entertainment fan in me hopes that what we're seeing with this is a bit of what the future can be. A story that starts in the cinema, that can expand out into the small screen, and then jump again seamlessly back into the theaters, and continue to draw a new generation of audiences to the wonderful art that's available in all these different mediums.
I gotta ask you. You know, usually on the pod, I close with asking if this is a history movie or not, and that's not what I'm going to ask today. I rang you up a couple days ago. I was like, you want to do this? I need to see it. All right,
Yeah,
you've got a book coming out. We've got a couple years to promote it. But
yeah.
are you going to watch the rest of the series?
Oh, dude, I can't wait. I'm I'm
I'm
I'm
so in.
this. Yeah, this is appointment television for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
feels like it, right?
Yeah. And I'm so excited, like because of writing the new book on Batman, I was going to have to watch this show anyways, right? But
Right.
I'm excited to watch this show.
Yeah.
This is just personally, with what they did with this first episode. Uh, I'm thrilled to see where it goes next.
Yeah. So I watched Shogun with a good friend of mine,
Yeah,
Colin Colbart, who's been on the pod, and he and I would
yeah,
like Tuesday nights we'd sit and tweet at
yeah,
each other or text each other the
yeah,
whole time.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
like we were watching this, the other night. He's in DC area, and we're texting. We're like, "This is our new Shogun." This feels like appointment. This is like what we've been waiting for. There are other
Yeah,
shows I love, The Bear on Hulu, but
yeah, yeah.
I'm traumatized from watching that show so much. Um, Second episode's coming out tonight, Sunday. We're going to get this episode up
Yeah,
either tonight or Monday morning, so people will have a
yeah,
chance to have seen a couple of these. Like, I'm so glad that you stopped in to made the time. I know this was last second on a Sunday. We
hey,
got falls today, so
yeah.
dude, thank you so much for being here. I really, really do appreciate it.
Hey, it is a treat every time I get to come talk to you, Jason, and I love HATM and the whole community, and it is just the best. I love that there are people out there who, like me, love their pop culture and love history, and think that there's some collaboration between the two.
I sure hope so, because this is my own village origin story. So, speaking of which, if you guys listening right now would like to fuel the rise of Historians of the Movies podcast and yours truly, the villains before you, you can continue to share this pod on social media, TikTok. That's what the kids are doing these days. You can also visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/historians of the movies, to get yourself some swag and help produce this show. Blake, this was awesome. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thanks, man.
All right,
Had a
bye.
great time.